React mastery might be in your destiny, and this video could open your React eye. Jokes aside, solving this React question is the perfect way to prep for your next React interview or just sharpen your skills. I call it
the memory game.
And it has everything those pesky interviewers like to put in their coding challenges. The game has a timer up top that is constantly increasing, just like your blood pressure during your last coding interview. To stop your blood pressure from increasing, timer from increasing, all you have to do is complete the challenge, which, much like your last interview, is a maze with correct and incorrect decisions. The game has 5 levels, each with 2 tiles. One tile is correct and the other is not, possibly inspired by a Korean game show. Get the tile correct and you can move on to the next level. Get it incorrect and you get reset back to level 1. The timer stops when you complete the last level. Oh, and one more thing. The correct tiles are randomized each game. Simple rules to you and me, but the speedrunners out there, they are already scheming. More importantly, I think
the memory game
is the perfect question because it will introduce you to all the concepts asked in React coding challenges, including the following hooks, setting and clearing intervals, JavaScript functions, and more. Okay, open your text editors as it's time to fulfill your destiny and become a React master. In an empty file with React imported, let's start by creating an empty component called MemoryGame and exporting it as the default. Then in the return section, let's add a div and within it a paragraph tag. The paragraph tag will be used to display the timer. We will be building the visual aspect of this component first, then add functionality to it. I like this method as it better helps visualize how we want our component to work. For this example, we will be using a bit of CSS, but you can style it however you want. Here, the wrapper style is for the top level div and the timer style is for the paragraph tag. In our React file, I have updated our code to use the styles. I'm using Next.js for this tutorial, and how you add styles could look a little different. Okay, our next step is to create the 5 levels of the game. And remember, they have to be randomized. Let's start by creating a function called getRandomizedRoute. This will be outside the component. Within it, we will create an empty list or random list. This will store the correct paths at each level. To it, we want to randomly add values of either left or right. If the first item in the array is a left, then the correct move on the first level is a left. And if the second item is a right, then the correct move on the second level is a right. Now, to get 5 random left or right values, let's create a for loop that loops 5 times. Within each loop, we will use the mat.flow and the mat.random function to generate a random number that will be either 0 or 1. If the number is 0, let's push left to the random list. If it is 1, let's push right. Then let's return the random list. Finally, we will generate the correct path. Remember to place this outside the component so it does not run every time a component re-renders. Okay, now that our variable correct route has a solution, let's work on displaying the levels. Let's start by adding a div below a paragraph tag. This will serve as a wrapper around the levels. Within it, let's map through a correct route and for each return 2 divs. One for the left path and one for the right. Back in our CSS file, I have added styles for a level wrapper and for the possible routes. And in our React file, I have updated the elements to use these styles. Looking at our output, the shell of our component is now complete. That means it is time to get our hands dirty with the functionality. To keep track of the progress of the game, we will be using a first state variable, the useState hook. This hook lets us add state variables to our component. State variables are like a component's memory. They help our component remember and keep track of things. The syntax of the useState hook is as follows. The first variable is our state variable. It's what we want our component to remember. The second state variable is our setState variable. It is how we update our state variable. And finally, we have the initial value. In our case, current path will be an array. Initially, it will store 5 nulls. As the game progresses in levels, the nulls will be replaced with lefts and rights. setCurrentPath will be used to update the array. The first use of the state variable will be for one minor feature I did not mention earlier. It is that we should only be able to click on the current level that we are at. Okay, to find out which level is clickable, we need to find the first value in current path that is null. When a tile is clickable, we want to make the cursor a pointer. I've added these tiles in our CSS. Now, within our map function, let's create a variable called isClickable. We want this to be true only for the index that matches the index of our next clickable tile. And we will apply our CSS styles in this case. Back in our output, we can now see our cursor as the pointer on the first level, which is what we want. Alright, looking good so far. Next, let's implement clicking on a tile. We'll start off by creating a function called onButtonClick that takes in a side and an index. The side will be either left or right, and the index will be the level pressed. Within the function, we're first going to check what the correct side for that level is. And we will do this by checking the correct route's array value at the index passed in. If the user pressed the correct side, we want to move to the next level. But if they press the wrong side, we want to reset the game. To move to the next level, we will use a setCurrentPath function. The function itself accepts a function as a prop. I will write down the code first, then break it down. Here, prevPath is the previous path, and the return value of the function will be the new path. We want the return value to be a map function on the previous array, where we update the value of the current index to the side and leave all the other values unchanged. For example, if the user pressed the left tile on the third index of the game, currentPath will have its third index set to left. Now a question that many people have is, why did we use the setCurrentPath function instead of directly just updating currentPath? The correct answer for this is that state variables should be treated as read-only and should not be mutated. Okay, now for the else statement. If a user presses the wrong button, let's update currentPath back to its initial value. Finally, we're going to use the function in the onClick handler of our tiles, only if they are clickable. During the game, if a correct tile is pressed, we want to update its color to green. For this, I have added some CSS styles. Back in our map function, we're going to check if the current selection is the correct one by checking what the user has. Next, let's check if left is correct or right is correct. And finally, let's apply these styles. Now, looking at our output, when the correct tile is selected, it turns green. And when the wrong tile is selected, we reset the board. This is looking great so far, and we're getting close to the end. If you are finding this video helpful, you can help me by liking this video and subscribing. Now, back in our code, there is a mistake I made. Let me know if you caught it. The key in our map function would actually be at the React fragment level and not the div level. The next step of this challenge is the timer. We want it to start at 0 and keep on increasing till we finish the game. To build this, we're going to start off by using the useState hook. We will use it here to store the time. Timer will give us the current time and the initial value will be 0. Next, we will use another React hook called usedRef. This hook is similar to the useState hook. It lets us store values, but it has two key differences from the useState hook. The first is that the value stored here cannot be used for rendering. The second is that updating the useRef variable does not cause a component re-render. We will use our ref variable to store our interval ID, which we can later use to cancel the timer when needed. The initial value of our ref will be null, but once we start our timer, we will update our ref to be its ID. So let's start the timer. To do so, we will use a React hook, useEffect. This hook has two key parts: the logic and the dependency list. The logic is the function that runs when this hook is triggered. The dependency list is what triggers the hook. Every time an item in the dependency list changes, the logic of the hook runs. In the logic part of our hook, we will start the timer by using the setInterval function, updating the state variable by 1 every 100 milliseconds, or 10 times a second. We will use the setTimer function for this. pref_timer is the previous time number, and the return value is the new time number, which will be one more than the previous value. The setInterval function will return as interval ID. We will store this in our ref variable. To update our ref variable, we will use its .current value. Finally, to the useEffect hook, we will add a return statement. This runs when the component dismounts. Here, we want to clear the timer to prevent memory leaks and other errors. Our useEffect hook has an empty dependency list, which means it only runs when the component mounts and never again. Okay, let's display our timer in the paragraph tag and look at the output. Nice, we have a functioning timer. There are just two things left: format the timer to seconds and stop the timer when the user wins the game. Back in our code, let's divide our timer by 10 and use the toFixed function to only show one decimal place. And now to clear the timer, we will leverage a useEffect hook. We can know if the game is complete if all the values in current path are not null. We will use the every function to check for this. Next, if all filled is true and we have our interval ref, let's clear the interval. Finally, we want this hook to run every time our current path is updated, so we'll add it to the dependency list. And there you have it, our game is now complete. You can find all this code in the description. Thank you so much for watching till the very end. I am the Helpful Coder, and I hope you found this video, well, helpful. If you have any other questions you would like me to solve, please leave them in the comments below.